Imagine waking up and the cave mouth is gone. Not collapsed, not blocked by rock. Buried, a wall of white where the entrance used to be, packed so tight the gray morning light barely gets through it. For one terrifying second, you can't remember which direction is out. The cave smells the way it has for 3 weeks now, damp stone, old smoke, wet hide. And people who haven't stepped outside in far too long. Your son is beside you, wrapped in every hide your family owns, and even through all of it, you can feel how cold he already is. This isn't a storm. This is the 4th week of one. And the thing that's about to almost kill you isn't the cold. It's the air. You don't know that yet. Nobody in this cave does. But by the time this story ends, you will, and so will, the family you're about to meet. You are 20,000 years ago, near the edge of the Great Ice, in a winter that has stopped behaving like every winter before it. There is only this cave, this family, and one old woman who has seen a version of this before, and who has spent years quietly preparing for a day none of you thought would actually come. Before your mother checks anything else, she does the same thing she's done every morning for 3 weeks. She presses her palm flat against the cave wall, just for a second. Nobody's ever asked her why. Then she starts counting. Strips of dried meat, bundles of fat, a handful of frozen roots. She doesn't say the number out loud, but her face isn't a good one. How long, you ask? 8 days, she says. 10, if we're careful. The storm outside has been going for 22. Every morning, before anyone checks the food, they check the fire. Nobody decided this out loud. It just became the rule. Because if the fire is still alive, the family probably is too. Every night, before sleeping, each person looks at it, wants a small flame kept low and constant, instead of large and hungry, and nobody says why they look. Everyone already knows. Your wife feeds it in slivers instead of branches, because a fire that burns hot for an hour and dies is worth less than one that burns low for a week. Your son sits close enough that his knees are nearly in the coals, and nobody tells him to move back. Right now, closeness to fire isn't a bad habit. It's the difference between fingers that work by morning and fingers that don't. Every other weather, you've learned to read. Rain has smells. Wind has warnings. Snow like this gives you nothing a single flat color in every direction. No horizon. No path to the river, no way to tell up from down if you stood in the open too long. This isn't the first winter like this, your mother says, watching the horizon. It feels like it, you say. It's only the first one you've seen. You try to tie a leather strap around a bundle of wood. The knot slips. You try again. Your fingers won't close properly anymore. You stare at your own hand for a second. It still belongs to you. It just isn't listening. Your mother notices before you do. Move, she says. She doesn't explain why. She already knows. You get up. You stamp your feet. You work your fingers open and shut until feeling crawls back into them like something waking up angry. Blood pulls back from the skin, from fingers, from toes, and pools around the organs that matter most, a trade your body makes without asking you. Ignore that trade too long, and you lose fingers before you lose your life. That night, your mother changes how everyone sleeps. Children in the center, packed against the warmest bodies. Adults arranged around them, back to back, sealing in heat instead of losing it. She sleeps nearest the entrance herself, in the coldest spot of all, without anyone asking her to. On the 14th night, deep into the 2nd week, your son falls asleep beside the fire. Too quickly. You try to wake him for his portion of food. He opens his eyes for a moment, unfocused, then closes them again, heavy, like something is pulling him back under. Your wife smiles, brushing hair off his forehead. He's finally warm. Your mother doesn't smile. She looks at the fire burning lower than it should for the wood it's getting. Then at the entrance, sealed tighter than it's ever been, packed snow and hide stacked high with only a narrow gap left for smoke. Then she's on her feet, digging at that gap with both hands. Breaking through a seal the wind had quietly buried hours earlier. Cold air rushes in, sharp and stinging, and within minutes your son's eyes open properly clear this time, confused, asking why everyone is staring at him. Nobody explains it to him that night. You barely understand it yourself. Here is the part that should stop you. The wall built to save you from the cold outside was, that night, quietly taking your son somewhere none of you could follow. A sealed cave with a low fire doesn't just get smoky. It gets suffocating, and the air can turn wrong long before anyone notices anything is burning. Cold, you can feel coming. Bad air just makes you sleepy and calls it warmth. From that night on, your mother checks the draft gap herself every few hours without being asked. On the 16th day, your mother does something that makes no sense to you at first. She takes 3 fist-sized stones, sets them at the very edge of the fire, and leaves them there for hours, turning them occasionally like there's something worth cooking. Then, once the cave has gone dark and cold for the night, she wraps each one in a fold of hide and tucks them under the bedding, near your son's feet, near your wife's back, near the small of her own. Within minutes, the bedding is warm in a way it hasn't been in weeks. It's heat you can carry somewhere fire can't reach a stone that spent all day soaking up warmth, now spending all night giving it back. The closest thing your family has to a furnace that doesn't need feeding. Your son watches your mother pile more snow against the outer wall of the cave and frowns. Shouldn't we dig it away? She shakes her head. The wind outside is colder than the snow will ever be. But the snow keeps the wind away from this wall. He doesn't understand at first. Neither did you, the first time she told you. Snow, packed thick enough, traps air inside itself and trapped air. Even freezing air doesn't steal warmth from stone the way open wind does. The very thing that buried your entrance is now the only thing standing between this wall and a wind that would strip the cave's warmth away in hours. The snow isn't the enemy tonight. It's the reason the cold outside hasn't found its way all the way in. On the 18th day, the wind stops. The sky clears, pale and blinding after weeks of gray. It's over, your son says, and for a moment his face does something it hasn't done in weeks relaxes, like a held breath finally let go. You go out. You gather wood. You reach the food cache buried near a fallen tree half a day's walk away, and for a few hours, hope feels like something you're allowed to have again. Then, just past midday, the horizon to the north turns a bruised gray-purple, the exact shade your mother once told you to never trust. Inside, she says. Now, you don't argue. You've learned not to argue with that voice. The second storm hits within the hour, worse than the first. On the 24th night, deep into the second storm, you hear something outside that isn't wind. A rhythm. Dull, muffled thuds coming from somewhere beyond the buried entrance. Digging, another family. Somewhere out there, someone else is fighting the same storm you are. You press your ear to the packed snow and listen, and for a moment, the sound seems closer, more desperate, and you almost call out. Your mother stops you with a hand on your arm. Shouting won't reach them through this much snow, and opening even a small gap risks everything you just spent a night sealing shut. You listen instead. The digging continues, unevenly, for a long while. Then it stops. You never find out if it stopped because they broke through to safety, or because they couldn't dig anymore. By the 26th day, 4 days of rations remain, at best, and no way to tell how much longer the storm intends to last. Someone has to try for the buried cache again. Your wife starts to volunteer. Your mother touches the cave wall once, the way she does before every decision, and cuts her off before the sentence finishes. You feed the fire better than any of us, she says. And you to you still remember the path. It isn't a debate. It's a decision she's clearly already made, days ago, and settled on her own before anyone said it out loud. You go. Alone, following markers only you would recognize, digging where a fallen tree should be under snow deep enough to have erased it twice over. You find the cache. You make it back before dark swallows the path behind you. That night, you watch your mother without meaning to. She takes the smallest piece of dried meat from what's left, cuts it in half with a small stone blade, and sets both halves on your son's portion and your wife's. She puts nothing on her own. Nobody says anything. There's no narration for this, no explanation offered, no thanks given. She simply eats less. Again, the way she has for longer than anyone has actually been counting. On the 28th day, your mother folds a hide a specific way and packs it with dry moss she stored months ago for exactly this reason: moss that holds warmth without holding water, that stays soft instead of freezing solid against skin. She wraps your son's feet in it, layer by layer. "Where did you learn this?" "From a winter that almost took my brother's toes," she says. "Your grandfather learned it from a winter before that." Nobody in this family invents this from nothing. We remember it exactly when we need to. On the 29th night, the cave roof makes a sound none of you have heard before, a long, low groan, the weight of weeks of snow finally testing the stone. Your son cries quietly into your shoulder. Your mother touches the wall once, then moves everyone to the lowest, thickest part of the ceiling, the section that's held through generations of storms exactly like this one, while you and your wife take turns listening for a second groan that would mean it's time to risk the blizzard rather than the stone. The groan doesn't come again. By morning, a thin crack has opened along one wall. The roof holds. On the 31st morning, the silence outside is different. Not the tense, holding its breath silence of a pausing storm. Something final. You dig, slow and careful, and when your hand finally breaks through into open air, the light that comes through is sharp and gold, and more real than anything has looked in a month. The world outside is unrecognizable landmarks buried under drifts taller than your father was, trees bent flat under weight they shouldn't have survived. Your son steps outside first, squinting, and laughs a real laugh, the kind you'd almost forgotten the sound of. Your mother steps out last. She touches the cave wall once more, on her way past it. This time, she smiles. 20,000 years later, someone kneels in this same cave with a small brush. He uncovers a circle of blackened stones, then a food pit dug beneath the frost line, then pressed into old ash near the back wall, the tiny footprints of a child. He doesn't know their names. He'll never know if they made it out on the 31st day, or the 40th, or not at all. But he knows they prepared for cold, for hunger, for a storm that could seal a family in and starve the air right out of a room without a single flame ever going wrong. Nothing about what he's uncovering looks improvised. It looks like people who had survived this nightmare before and made sure it would be remembered. Today, when it snows, you watch it through a window. Warm, waiting for someone to plow the road. You never have to count strips of meat against days of storm. You never have to dig at a draft gap in the dark, hoping you're not too late. You never have to choose who walks out into a blizzard, or listen to digging in the snow that goes silent and never tells you why. But some nights, years from now, when snow falls hard enough, you'll find yourself listening anyway, half expecting to hear digging again, somewhere out past the wall. People will tell you this family survived because they had fire. They didn't. They survived because one old woman remembered that before fire comes air. Before strength comes memory. Before survival comes someone old enough to remember the last time the world tried this. The cave wasn't keeping the cold out anymore. By the end, it was keeping death out one gap, one stone, one portion of food at a time. The storm eventually stopped. The knowledge that outlasted it never did. Somewhere, a grandmother is still teaching a grandchild how to fold moss into hide, not because the world demands it anymore, but because some lessons feel too important to let a comfortable winter make them disappear.